up?
Is it working? Hello. Okay. Well, first of all, as I was just telling everybody as we came in, thank you everyone for coming out. We didn't know if you guys were ready, and it looks like you're more than ready, so appreciate it. And of course, our panelists here, we have James, Jude, Courtney, and Chris Durand for coming all the way out to Connecticut, share their experiences with us today. So a round of applause. All right, so we'll just jump into it here. So, everybody's excited.
Chris, you did that, right?
So, you know, I just go around and talk about what's your origin story. Fans of the 1978 original, just a job. How did you get the roles?
Chris, I'll let you start.
Yeah, well, sequence where this is going.
Leanne, check this mic.
Oh.
All right, so
Take Mike's mic.
the way I got the role was very straightforward, actually. I was called in for an audition, and there were 5 of us. Donna Keegan, who doubles Jamie Lee Curtis, was running H2O, and she got this call, and they looked at a whole bunch of actors, straight up actors, and didn't like anybody and decided, hey, we've done physical before, it's always come from a stunt background, let's try that route. And she said, I'm going to give you 5 guys.
Is that one?
Is it just me? It must be me. All right. So what happened is she said, look, I'm going to give you 5 guys that are all qualified, pick somebody. One was Tom Morgan. Another was her ex-husband, who I thought she was rooting for because they have a kid together. I figured, you know, that would make sense. And I just went in and I sat down and I talked to Steve Miner, and I talked to, the first was with him, and we just sat and had a conversation for a little while, and I didn't know that I was Donna's first pick. That was her recommendation. And I honestly had no idea what a big deal it was, which really, really, really helped me in the end because I didn't get in my head about it. I never worried about it. So I just went in and had a conversation with him, told him what kind of stuff I'd done. She'd obviously told him what kind of stuff I could do. And it came down to me and one other guy who had a little bit of a kind of a spark, if you will. You could see he could go off sometimes. And they really kind of went, who do you want to hang out with for the next 3 months? And it was that easy. They gave me a call. And I'll tell a little side story here. With that meeting, they had said on the side, and I heard them say, we're not going to do what came before. So when I got it, I'm like, cool, we're not going to do what came before, so I didn't look at anything. Why? We weren't doing that. So I never, ever, ever got in my head about it and never, ever worried about it. And I just showed up on set and we started working.
Nice. Good job, Chris.
Got away with that one.
I know, right? So I had gotten to a place in my career where I decided I wasn't going to work unless someone called me and asked me. I was done with auditioning. I was done with, you know, certainly I was decades away from groveling. I wasn't 25 anymore, and I had focused on, was focusing on making my own films, writing and producing. I had gotten to some pretty serious negotiations. I moved back to South Carolina, where I'm from, because I decided I finally needed to, at like 59, settle down and, you know, be an adult. And so I wanted to be close to my family, and I was writing, and I was, you know, working some deals, and I get a call from Ron Hutchinson. Now I knew Halloween was shooting in South Carolina, in Charleston, but like I said, I wasn't going for anything. I wasn't reaching for anything. And I had calls, you know, mostly commercial stuff, you know, since I had made that decision. And so I get a call from Ron Hutchinson. He had stunt coordinated the 2 Rob Zombie Halloweens. And I knew Ron for like 35 years. I'd never worked for him. I had worked as an actor on shows that he was stunt coordinating, but he knew me as an actor and a stuntman. And so when Ron read the screenplay, he called Malika Akkad and David Gordon Green and said, look guys, this script is different than any other one. You need a guy who's a really good actor, and a really good stuntman, and there's not many of those guys around. And David Gordon Green said, well, he needs to be 6'3", 200 pounds, and he's got to be in his 60s. Do you know anybody? And Ron was like, well, and actually what it came down to was he was pounding his head against the wall. He talked to my very dear friend, Chris Nielsen, who's one of the best car guys in town. The guy can do anything in an automobile in terms of stunts. He called Chris, and Jennifer, Chris's wife, was like, dude, Jim Courtney. And so Chris recommended me, and Ron, you know, I told Malik and David and Ryan Turk and all those guys that, you know, that I'm the only guy he knew. So I get a call from Ron. He says, hey, yeah, you know, this is what happened. So, you know, so when Ron called, I didn't know he was angling for me. He just said, you know, we're doing another Halloween. I was like, awesome, dude. That's gonna be so much fun. You're gonna have a great time. Good for you. And he goes, well, you know, this is what happened, and this is what David said, and are you available? I was like, yeah, sure. So they called me down to Charleston. I was in Columbia, South Carolina. Charleston's about an hour away, and I drive down to Charleston, and they put me on tape. And, you know, they wanted to see where I moved, and then we talked about psychology, specifically the sexual nature of psychopathic killing, which kind of freaked out the casting director a little bit. He measurably changed after I told him about that. And then, you know, I did a little movement and that kind of stuff. I was in there for a little while, though. I mean, we really worked a lot. I walked out of that taping, and I got in my pickup truck, and I wasn't even out of the parking lot. And I got a call from Blumhouse in California. They're asking if I'm available to shoot the film. I'm like, yeah, I'm available. So I didn't even get to the freeway, which is about 2 miles away, and they called me back, and they said, hey, David Gordon Green wants to meet you. And I was like, yeah, sure. So it was supposed to shoot like in October, and I didn't hear anything. And I mean, seriously, for the first time in my life, you know, like people always say, just let it go, man, just let it go, you know, let the universe like bring it to you. And for the first time in my life, I actually did that. I let it go. I didn't give a rat's ass. And so, you know, October came and went, and I was like, okay, cool, man, I'm busy, man, I got stuff to do. And then all of a sudden in November, I get the call and said, hey, you know, we're going, we're still available. I was like, yeah. So it was one of those things was meant to be. As I understand it, they had talked to Tom Morga, but he physically couldn't do it. He had just had knee surgery, and he just was not it. Because David Gordon Green wanted initially to have one of the guys who had played it. For some reason, he fixated on Tom. Tom was not available. And so, as far as I know, I'm the only guy they really looked at after talking to Tom. When they put me on tape, they cut off the auditions. It was it. It was a done deal.
Oh, that's great. All right. At our last HorrorFest in 2019, before the world moved on, we had Don Shanks here, who portrayed Michael Myers in Halloween 5. He stated on the stage that he was directed to walk different, act different. He even, at one, they had him put on lifts in his shoes to be bigger, etc. So you talked a little bit about, you know, the different direction, the psychology. I know both of you came in when they're reinventing it, looking at it, you know, was there a new look, or was it, we want you to look just like the original, or new idea, or?
Well, let me go to this from H2O point of view, because when I came in, Steve was very open to letting me do what I thought was right. And of course, I had no idea what I was doing, because I hadn't watched any of them, so I did what I thought was right for the character I thought that it was. And, you know, at some point, you kind of stand there and you realize it's like, look, the mask is scary, the lighting's scary, you know, the motions might be scary. All of those things add to it. Obviously, the music comes in, everything else, but there's still something missing with this whole thing. There's not an energy there yet, and you have to bring that, and you got to find it. And so I go, how am I going to be scared? I'm a guy in a mask. I got no dialogue, I got no expressions, right? What do I do? And that's when I landed on the big cat. I landed on the predator. You know, that's what this guy is. So I basically thought of a tiger, and if you've ever seen a tiger lock eyes on prey, it's frightening because you cannot break that gaze. When they're locked on, they are locked on, and it's done, and something primal takes over. And so that's what I did. Every take, I kind of would duck my head, and I'd lock on my target, you know, whatever it was at that moment. And I'd do kind of a guttural growl, which the sound guy picked up on and laced in there on the soundtrack. kind of low, and played it that way, and it translates to film. That energy, that intent. If you don't have that intent behind what you're doing, it just won't work as well. It'll fall flat. So in terms of discussions for that, there were none. It was no news is good news, and that's how this business works. Everyone thinks you get accolades all the time. Really, if things are working, it's like, great, cut, move on, let's go. You know, if you do it wrong, you're going to hear about it. Okay. So there were two things they ever showed me. They showed me the head tilt right before I did it for kind of a wide shot that everyone uses as a meme now. And they showed me the closet scene because we were overlapping that and doing a twist on it. Other than that, I just played it how I thought was right, and Steve let me. And I knew I was hitting the right beat when you hear him giggle in the other room at Video Village when you finish the tape.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that Chris talks about Cat because David Gordon Green gave me no direction. The only thing he did was when I was hired, David called me. I was sitting on my couch with my cat Parsible on my lap, and he said, "So Shape, I want to talk to you about a little bit about the character." He said, "The only thing I'm going to talk to you about is I just feel." You've captured cat-like movements. I want to make sure that your iteration of the shape is cat-like. And I was like, well, it's funny you say that, David, because my cat Parsifal is sitting on my lap right now, and I've enjoyed watching him hunt over the years. Like he's just an incredible hunter, so badass that when I lived in Los Angeles, there were 4 big raccoons that were he was a stray cat. And everybody said in the neighborhood, yeah, no one can touch him, you can't get near him. I moved in this neighborhood, within a month he's chilling out with me on the porch. Within 2 months he's like sleeping on the couch or sleeping in the bed, in my house. So clearly he was, and I would go out of town for like 2 or 3 weeks and no one would see him. And then I'd pull up, a car driver would pull up and I'd see him on my porch waiting for me. So we clearly had a very deep bond. When I got the call to do the audition, David had told me that basically all the other, in this universe, all the other Halloweens didn't exist. They were just urban myth. They were just stories that people told. The only Halloween that existed was 1978, and the only other Halloween that was going to exist was 2018. So before I went down to be put on tape, I watched Halloween 1978 one time, and I used this gift that a great old comic actor named Ted Knight gave me years and years and years ago, way before I even started working professionally. When I first showed up in Hollywood, he said, he recognized that I was an actor, that I was, and he pulled me aside and said, look, what you need to do is emulate people. Like, if you want to expand your horizons as an actor, you need to learn to emulate. And I don't mean walking the way somebody walks and turning your hand the way they turn and tilting your head the way they tilt. He said, what you want to do is when you're walking behind somebody on the sidewalk, or you're talking to a bartender, or you're seeing somebody from across the restaurant, you want to reach into their soul, reach inside of them, feel what they feel. And once you feel what they feel, you will naturally move like they move. You will naturally speak like they speak. That is emulation. And so what I did was I watched Halloween 78 one time, and there's a particular scene where Nick Hassel's walking camera left to camera right in the backyard. And I'm just sitting there watching it, no thoughts, taking no notes, and all of a sudden in my head I go, I got it. And that's, so what because my job was to be Nick Hassel 40 years later. But I was not going to, I didn't look in the mirror, I didn't practice walking, none of that. I just trusted that the capturing the essence of what Nick had created, bringing it into my body and allowing it then to move the way my body moves, to be interpreted the way I interpret it. And then the reality is Chris will tell you, like one of the biggest things when you're a stuntman, and especially when you're fighting, is keeping people safe. Because you can really, really quickly hurt somebody or get hurt, and I mean badly. So, one of the reasons why people like us are hired to do what we do is because we're so exacting. First of all, we can hit marks, we can adjust, we have an awareness, usually that actors don't even have. Like, there's straight up actors who don't do stunts. we will be way more aware of the camera angles and, you know, when we're in the lens, when we're out of it, we'll be way more aware of marks because people can get hurt if we don't hit them. So, you know, for me, the moment I watched 78 before I even went down and was put on tape, I went into mission mode. I never thought about it. I didn't take notes. I just trusted that my process was going to be the process I needed, and you know, and there we have it.
I think there's something you said there which is really important to touch on too. When I started in stunts, and when you're doubling somebody versus playing a part, you kind of have to become that person to sell that. You can't just step in and have some guy who's semi-athletic, you know, doing jump spin kicks, all of a sudden it doesn't match. Right? So you got to kind of find their limitations and find their strengths and emulate those. And kind of one of the greatest compliments you can get if you're talking about stunts specifically is that you've embodied that character. So I used to do My Name's Earl all the time. I was Evil Earl, basically. And the crew would constantly go, you just become him every time. It's like, there's no difference. It's like him doing it, but it's you. And so that's kind of what becomes built in from us. We have an awareness or an ability to adapt that and take that on. And that's that emulation you're talking about. And of course, it plays differently when you're acting than if you're doing stunts, but the core concept's the same.
It's perfect. That was going to be my follow-up question. Well, thank you both. I'd like to turn it out to the audience now, see if anybody has any questions.
I think I'm
I'd like
going
to
to ask
follow up.
something.
Stand by, Mike.
I'm standing by. Well, I'll stroll over.
No, I got a microphone. You can stay up on the stage if you'd like, or you can walk in the audience. You know what? It's your show.
All right.
All right. Just watch it in front of the speaker.
Are you going to ask anything? Are you going to ask me something? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So this question is for James. There you go,
Check.
So what are you working on next? Like after Ends comes out, what projects are you working on? Like what ideas do you have? What kind of story are you working on now?
I have two things going on right now. I have a coming-of-age story of a high school soccer player that has been really, really respected and accepted by some Academy Award-winning level people. I was, just before COVID, was in negotiations with a large European, German to be specific, concern to finance it, and of course COVID hit, and you can't put thousands of extras into a stadium. So we're picking that back up. I also, how many people here know who Gahan Wilson is? Okay, so much of your generation, like the younger generations, will not know who he is, but he was in every single Playboy, New Yorker, Vanity Fair. His comics were totally grotesque and macabre. I mean, he wrote horror stories, like really, really cutting edge sort of pulp fiction horror stories, and they're really, really cool. His stepson, who he had collaborated with late in his later years, has that collection. They were, just before COVID, they were negotiating with another, American concern to do a series based on his work, and they, COVID came and then Gahan died. So Paul Winters is his name. Paul and I have come together to put Gahan's work on the screen again, because it really, he's really, he has a very interesting perspective, kind of social commentary, like David Gordon Green. There's definitely horror, but with an interesting sort of, social sort of twist and social commentary. So these are the two things I'm working on right now that I'm focused on. And then, as Chris will tell you, like, stuff will just come out of left field. You have no idea where stuff is going to come from. So those are the two things I'm focused on, and thanks for asking.
Hello? This one's for Chris. Of all the masks used in Halloween H2O, which was your favorite?
The Winston mask, the one we ended up with.
Okay.
So what happened, you guys, is 2 weeks before principal shooting, they lined up all of the masks that had come before, and they videotaped and took still shots of me and them in different lighting, and they tried to figure out what they wanted to do, and they designed the mask, the KMB mask to start. And generally speaking, once you're filming, you know, you'll finish your day, they'll send the film off, they'll develop the film, and the next evening they have what are called dailies, and you can see how everything's looking. And so obviously they were looking at dailies as we went for 5 weeks before they decided they didn't like the mask. And you're like, okay, that's kind of a long time in you guys to make that decision. So it was Friday, we were shooting the interior scene when I killed the nurse at the very beginning of the movie. And everything blew up, and we shot the scene with the KMB mask, and we shot the scene with the Part 6 mask. And Steve lit it really dark and tried to hide it the best he could to see what we could do. And by Monday, we had a brand new mask. And it ended up, I mean, it was the right move in the long run, but I just wish we had done it 1 weekend and not 5 weeks. Because we had to shoot a whole bunch of the scenes over. And that's tough because it's not tough for me in the sense that with stunts, you try to do everything once. We're known for getting things in one take, but sometimes you have to do two, and if it's a bumper of a stunt that you've done, and you gotta do it again, you gotta be able to get up and do it with as much, if not more, energy. So I was used to being able to recover and bring it back and not worry about it. The crew was a little more deflated because we had gotten some great shots and they had to kind of go back and reset things. But I think by leading that off and not ever getting discouraged, that helped them. And then it was the right move to redo it.
Thank you.
This one's for both of you. What was your favorite kills that you guys got to do?
I'll tell you probably my favorite kill in H2O and why, and it won't be what you think, but it'll make sense. So when I stick at him and I lift him up in the air and he's twitching in the air.
Yeah.
And it's not my favorite kill because I'm killing Adam and he's doing that. It's my favorite kill is because I'm not paying any attention to Adam. Because it's got nothing to do with Adam, it's got everything to do with Jamie. So I'm sticking him and I'm holding him up there, and if you notice where I'm looking, I'm not looking at Adam at all, I'm staring Jamie down the whole time. Basically, like, look what I've done to you, to your life, and look what I'm gonna come do to you now. And there's this just pause while he's twitching and going, and then I just yank the knife out and go for her. And so it's kind of a powerful psychological kill, and that's why it would be my favorite.
I can't tell you about kills. And I can't even tell you what's going to be in ends. But I can tell you, for 2018, I mean, they're all fun, you know. I mean, killing people is just fun. It's why you guys are here, it's why Chris and I are here, you know. For me, I have two kills that are really my favorite for two different reasons. One is the window kill, you know, because that's the way I would take somebody out. There's no fanfare. You get in quietly, do your job, and leave. And that was part and parcel to the mafia hitman that was my housemate for a while. When he got out of prison, he was in a safe house, and his life story was fascinating. And a friend of mine put us together, and we were going to do his life story, and there, you know, and we got very close to getting that film made actually, until the man whose name I won't mention did what he does, and he did it again, and kind of things went away. But I spent months, you know, with recording and interviewing and writing, and so. I did a little film called The Hit List, and I was just an Australian hitman at the end, and I come in and I have this, you know, dialogue and a little gunfight, and then I'm shot, boom, 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 and I do a high fall off a balcony into a pool. And so, you know, my buddy, we walk out, he goes, Jimmy likes movies. That's not how you kill people. I was like, oh, Dante and I worked out, you know, I told him his name, but you're not going to know who he is. So we'd worked out together. I mean, the guy, one of the martial arts I've done is Aikido, which is a very flowing mart and is completely useless unless you have other skills, but it's highly effective if you have other martial skills and other martial training. And also, you know, I studied Aikido in combination with Kali, a Filipino art, which to my mind is one of the most efficient arts, especially when it comes to knife fighting and stick fighting. And so he and I'd go and work out, and this one of the things he said is, you love watching movies when people come in and go, "You're gonna get it, I'm headed with you." You're gonna have all this dialogue, but the simple truth is, when you're gonna kill somebody, you need to get in, get it done, and get out. And so that's why I love the window scene, but the bathroom scene was so much fun to shoot. Beating the shit out of two people before you kill them is just so much fun. You know, it's just so much fun. And by the way, the teeth in that scene were real teeth from a dental college.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Hello?
Oh, can I just say this about the bathroom scene too? Okay, so both Rianne and Jefferson had stunt doubles, and they were very, very good doubles. I mean, they were really good. You could put cameras in front of them. They were such good doubles. And Rianne wanted to do her own work, and of course we had a double. And for the, we used a little bit of the double stuff, but mostly Rianne stuff. Jefferson, who we call Bob, wanted nothing to do with fighting. He wanted nothing to do with it. When we saw a rehearsal, he was like, "Dude, I want not a chance." But I guess somewhere in his psyche, he went, "Oh, no, dude, I'm not going to be that guy who, was too afraid to fight." So he came back in and wanted to do it. And dude, he sold out, man. He went 100%. And I mean, so the difference though, again, when you're fighting with a stunt person who has martial skills and you've worked, is that although you're going hard, and especially when you're going to the body, you're going really hard, you know when to lighten up. You know when to not to make it so real that you're actually fighting the other person and struggling just for your survival or keeping your balance, or because that's unsafe. So, if Chris and I duke it out up here right now, it's gonna look hard, and believe me, I'm gonna get nailed in the stomach with a kick, and we're gonna nail each other in the body. We won't hit each other's heads because, depth of field in the camera, you can be 5 feet away to make it look like you just knocked the crap out of somebody. So in fighting those two in the bathroom, they both kicked like mules. And so part of the struggle was just keeping them in the camera lens and keeping them from hurting me and hurting themselves. So the struggle was even deeper and richer and a lot harder because they weren't stunt people. But it was fun.
This goes for both of you. How did it feel to play Michael Myers?
Very sexual.
I think it was just kind of fun. I think the most fun part was when I'd show up the next day and the ADs would hit me in the arm and say, "It's your fault I couldn't sleep all night." It's just having that impact was fun. It was learning, honestly, it was learning about what I didn't know when I started the whole thing. It was kind of what a big deal it was when people would come up on the street and, a sheriff would come up and ask for your autograph, or a doctor, or a mom, or, whomever. And then you get the reaction out of the crew as you win, and you kind of get this validation you're doing it right. It just became really rewarding and fun that way. Like you said, killing people is kind of fun.
It's a blast. I think for me, so David Gordon Green said to me in 2018, he said he'd only worked with one other guy who'd gone into that deep, dark space the way I did. And that guy ended up in a psych ward for 2 months. He didn't know how to get out of it. So what I do is, I've done a lot of meditation, I've done a lot of yoga, I've gone to South America and done plant medicine with shaman, I've done shamanic work with plant medicine in Africa, I've done Native American rituals in North America, I've done a lot of psychological, emotional, and spiritual work on myself. So I've gone to very, very dark places and I'm very comfortable doing that. And so for me, exercising that place of going to the space beyond 3D, beyond judgment, beyond right, wrong, good or bad, black and white, going to a place of isness, just being in this place, the place that inhabited the shape. that place inhabited me. So what I would do is I would breathe into it and feeling the depth and the space of that while I was working. And then when I heard check the gate, so you'll say we're doing one particular scene, you may have 5, 10, 15, 20 takes, or 2 or 3 or whatever, but as soon as you hear check the gate, that means your setup is done, that particular scene and that from those particular angles is done. That's when Chris Nelson would come over and take the mask off me. And as that happened, or as soon as I heard check the gate, I would take a deep breath and I would release that space and I would go back to being me, just a dipshit.
Anybody have a question for here?
Is this on?
I just want how John Carpenter kind of influenced your work on the 2018 film. Just kind of like what part he played, if at all, you know, and just kind of what he did for the 2018 film with as far as input.
Dude, he's a salty old bastard. and he had nothing to do with me. I mean, even when I met him, seriously, he's a salty ass dude. So he showed up on the set like 3 weeks in. I was introduced to him, and he could have given a fuck. He could care less. And
He wants
that's
that
the way it
paycheck.
stayed.
Hi there. Thanks for coming. And I was just wondering, you were talking a little bit about going to a very deep, dark space. Would you share those thoughts, both of you, of what it was like to do that and what you were particularly thinking during the scenes, if you want to?
So for me, what I tried to do to get into the right headspace with all of this was to separate myself from everybody else before shots. So for instance, when I'm at the gate and I'm fumbling with the keys, when I first show up at the gate and the kids are trapped, right? I avoided them for an hour because everyone was kind of hanging out in the same, and I made, I knew where they were at all times, and if they went that way, I went the other way, and I stayed away from them because I didn't want them to see me. And when it was time and they were lining them up, I got ready about 50 feet away. And I had my own time, and they said, "Do you want to come up?" And I said, "No. Tell me when we're rolling." And they left me alone, and I stayed back. And then I stacked myself up behind the camera so they couldn't see me. And as they rolled, I started walking. And, by the time they said action, I was there, and I was in their face all of a sudden, already in character, already doing my thing. And I did that in reverse as well. Once the scene was over, I'd get away from them so they didn't see me coming out from under the mask. Right, so there's a technical aspect to that, but there's also a moment where you've got time to kind of, to take your time to get into character, if you will. And that sounds so surfacey, but I think James said it right. You got to kind of let everything go. Like all of the stuff around you is gone. And when you put that on, you've got to become him for a little while. But I needed to do it away from everybody. And Jamie kept trying to screw me up. Every time I had a scene with her, she'd come up and get right in my face with the mask on, going, "I'm gonna kick your ass." I'm like, "You're killing me." So I'd have to leave and wander off somewhere from her for a bit and try to do the same. But with that, you don't have any option. I mean, it's just snapping the character at that point. But by then, I'd kind of found him, and so I can jump to that space quickly, and I have no problem backing out of it. It's kind of when you say, "Cut, check the gate." Check the gate means that the little gate that covers the film is clear. You can get a hair on it. Everything's clean. We're good to go. And the shot's clean. So when they'd say that, I would back out and I could let it all just evaporate. But I'm quick at that. That's natural for me for some reason.
Yeah, I'd have to say, I have not intellectualized this character, and I will not until after I do my last film, until I do the last Halloween. We shoot in January, February, March. But until then, I have never intellectualized this character, and I will not, because the spiritual place of the character is for me the essence of it. If you have, there are roles you play where you have to intellectualize, and you really have to, break down all these motivations. And Stella Adler was one of my acting coaches. She was Marlon Brando's coach. And I also had a private coach from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. So I'm deeply aware of, method acting and, various, the Stanislavski method and, all these various perspectives of James Lang, like the old British sort of, acting style. But you have to let all that go, because each character you play and each thing you do has its own demands. I mean, you're in relationship with this being, and allowing this being into you. It's like being in a love relationship, or a business relationship, or a familiar relationship. Each person is different. Each action you take is different. So for this particular character, there is no thought process, dude. When that mask goes on me, or even in the scenes where I'm not wearing a mask but I know I'm in character, there is no thought process. There is nothing. It's blank. I'm just driven by something deep inside me, and that's how it's 100% intuitive. And occasionally David Green would call me over, Jimmy, come on, look at this, man, look at this. All right. So we'd look on the monitor because we had work to do. And you could step outside of it for a moment, be intellectually, in tune to the director and to the camera people and all that. You never really lose that, because there's that part of us that's there. Get shot, go back and hit my head on the ground. I look at Paul, the camera operator, and go, all right, Paul, where do you need my head? He goes, boom, right there. I'm like, that's where I'm gonna fall. And I know exactly where I'm gonna fall, going backwards. Okay, that's, part of it is, the intellectual, the engineering part of it, the measuring in time and space. But part of it, like Chris said, is like, you do this so often that it's by rote. I mean, this is, you don't have to teach a cowboy how to ride a horse,
Let me tell you a side story, you guys, and maybe this will make it all make sense. Because you make your choices ahead of time, and your marks have to be intuitive at that point. Once you set them, you forget them, and you get there. But I was doing a shot in a film where I'm on a cable. I'm going to get ratcheted across a whole banquet table of food. It's like a shotgun blast, and I'm stepping into the shot, and boom, and I'm going. It's like a 14-foot table, and I'm all the way down through everything and off the other end. Ass over tea kettle backwards, done. And the ratchet didn't go the first time. But, I'm ready, I'm focused, you let everything go. I step into that mark, it's that 3, 2, 1, go, and you hit that spot, and nothing happened. But my focus went from the whole world down to a pinpoint in a split second. And then it sat there for a moment and then came back, and I'm like, so that's what happens when I'm in the middle of something big. It's like everything else goes away, right? And I've let go completely. So you step in and it's boom, and then whatever happens, I'm recovering in the air because I can't control that. So for instance, for Michael, you've got a mark, you've got A to B, you might have some spots that you have to hit technically for camera. But once you set that goal and that camera goes, it's almost as if the whole world goes away. And it's that same feeling where it's like you're hyper focused, and yet you're not focused on anything at all. And then when I went down the table with that stunt, when we did it the second time, everything's in slow motion. You're worried about it, like what's gonna happen, what's gonna go on, beforehand. But when I was in the middle of it, I just adapted as I went. And you have to be able to kind of get yourself to a spot where you let go and then trust that you've set everything already, and trust that character, like you're saying, and let that character do what that character's supposed to do. And then when you're done, and I'm in a pile on the other end of the table, and you're cut and you recover.
But that's when the magic happens. When you're in that place and as a professional, you're so good at hitting marks and being aware of the camera and being aware of everything around you that you can just have that tunnel vision and focus so deeply. That's where the magic happens. That's where things will come out of you that you had no idea even existed, because it's not you anymore. It's something else. And the ancient Greeks considered actors to be channels. In the modern metaphysical world, it's called trance-channeling, where a person will sit here on a stage or in a room and go into a meditative state, and their personality leaves, and another personality comes through and speaks. And UCLA studied the phenomenon. Happened to know one of the guys who was a trance channel that was studied at UCLA. When he was trance channeling, he was using 57% of his brain. Clearly, at least politicians don't use that much. You know, I mean, so, you know, we have no idea the level of energy and information that can come through when you're in that focused state, and everything in your world has been so carefully created, and you know, your body and every thread of your being is so available to be inspired. It's pretty cool, man. It's pretty freaking awesome.
All right, with that, I just want to take some time on behalf of Connecticut again to thank James and Chris for coming down, letting us know the insights behind the mask and the insights into acting and stunt acting. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, and I think Chris can speak. You know, I can speak for Chris. Well, I'll let him say something anyhow. He'll get the last word. He always does. You know, y'all don't know how much we absolutely appreciate you, because we can't do what we do without this relationship we have with you guys, and it really is a relationship, because we not only can we not make movies if we don't make money and people don't go to them. That's the base, you know, mentality view. There's a deep spiritual bond that happens between us and what we do, and you know, to do something that we love, to do something that, you know, we've dedicated our lives to and sacrificed for, and we're very hard at, to have people like yourselves appreciate what we do, I mean, it means the world. And for me, coming to these cons and meeting special people like you, I have never met one douchebag at a horror con. And it's the truth. And it's the truth. And people from every walk of life, you throw everything out the window. You know, race, religion, socioeconomics, sexual preference, who gives a rat's ass? You know, we're all here for a shared passion, and personally, I can't thank you enough for that. It really means the world.
What he said, that's the last word.
Ladies and gentlemen,
wanna go
we
shake
need
his
to
hand, yeah.
clean the
Are we
room
allowed
out for
to?
disinfecting.
Huh?
So if you want to get into the panel, please step downstairs.
Okay, that's good.